I'm a retired Green Beret, and the thing that almost broke me had nothing to do with war.
Come sit with me for a moment. I'm not gonna shout at you. I'm not gonna tell you to hustle harder or wake up at 4 in the morning or build an empire before breakfast. I've been around long enough to know that the loudest voices in the room are usually the ones with the least to say. My name is James Calloway. I served 23 years in the biggest army in the world, the last 14 of those with the Special Forces, what most people call the Green Berets. I've been in places that don't appear on civilian maps, made decisions that I still carry, and stood beside men whose names I whisper in quiet moments when the world gets too loud. I retired on a Tuesday, and by Thursday, I had no idea who I was anymore. That's where this story really begins. Most people think the hard part of a soldier's life is the war. They think it's the heat, the weight of the gear, the sound of incoming fire, the split-second calculations that determine who goes home. And yes, all of that is real. All of that lives inside you long after the uniform comes off. But I survived all of it, 23 years of it. What I was not prepared for, what nobody sat me down and warned me about, was the silence. Not the silence of a mountain at 3 in the morning before a mission. That silence I knew. That silence had a purpose. That silence meant something was about to begin. I mean the silence of a Tuesday afternoon in a house in Georgia. A ceiling fan turning slowly. A cup of coffee going cold on the counter. No mission brief. No brothers in the next room. No reason to lace up your boots. I remember sitting in that kitchen on my 3rd day as a civilian and thinking, I have survived everything. And now what? That question almost swallowed me whole. I won't dress it up. The first year after I retired was the hardest year of my life. Not because anything dramatic happened. It was actually the absence of drama that broke my rhythm. I had been wired, conditioned really, for high stakes. My nervous system didn't know what to do with ordinary mornings. My mind kept scanning for threats that weren't there. I'd find myself standing in a grocery store aisle, completely overwhelmed by the choice between 2 types of bread, and I'd have to leave the cart and walk outside just to breathe. My daughter, she was 9 at the time, once asked me why I always sat with my back to the wall in restaurants. I didn't have an answer she could understand. I didn't have one for myself either. I was a man who had led teams through some of the most demanding environments on earth, and I could not figure out how to be a father at a dinner table. That gap between who I had been and who I was supposed to become felt like a chasm I didn't have the equipment to cross. I started withdrawing. That's what I did. I got quieter. I told myself it was fine. I told myself men like me don't struggle. We adapt. That's what we're trained to do. Adapt and overcome. But there's a difference between adapting and disappearing. And for a while, I was disappearing. The turning point didn't come from a therapist's office. It didn't come from a book or a program or a conversation with someone who had the right words. It came from a walk. It was early November, cold but not brutal. I had started walking in the mornings not because I thought it would help, but because the house felt like it was closing in and I needed to move. Movement had always been my answer to everything. When things got heavy on a mission, you moved, you pushed forward, you kept your feet going even when your mind was falling apart.
And on one particular morning, maybe 6 weeks into this habit, I ended up a small lake about 2 miles from my house. I hadn't planned to stop there. I just did. The water was completely still. There was fog sitting on the surface. A single bird was calling somewhere in the trees. And something about that moment, the stillness of it, the utter indifference of that water to anything I had ever done or seen or survived, something about it just cracked me open. I sat down on the bank, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't try to fix anything. I didn't run a threat assessment. I didn't make a plan. I just sat there and let myself be a man, sitting by a lake on a cold November morning with his whole life ahead of him and no orders to follow. I wept, quietly, the way I had watched other men weep, not from weakness, but from the sheer, enormous relief of finally putting something down. I put 23 years down by that lake. Not the pride in it, not the brotherhood, the honor, but the grip. The relentless, exhausting grip of having to be unbreakable every single moment of every single day. I finally saw, sitting there, that the mission had changed, and I had not updated my orders. What I found on the other side of that morning was not a transformation. I want to be clear about that, because I distrust any story that promises transformation. What I found was something quieter, far more useful. I found continuity. I found that the same man who could hold his position for 61 hours, who could lead a team through absolute darkness with nothing but training and trust, that same man could sit with his daughter and help her with her homework. That same man could learn to cook, could learn to sleep without one ear open, could learn that a peaceful life is not a lesser life. The discipline I had built over 23 years did not disappear when the uniform came off. I just had to learn to point it at different things. Instead of pointing it at survival, I started pointing it at presence, at patience, at the very small, very sacred details of an ordinary day. I found that an ordinary day, when you have genuinely looked at the possibility of never having another one, is one of the most extraordinary things on this earth. My life right now is quiet, deliberately so. I wake up early because my body still believes in the morning. I make coffee slowly. I sit on my porch and watch the light come. Some mornings my daughter joins me, and we don't talk much. We've gotten comfortable in the same silence, which is something I never thought I'd be able to say. I mentor a handful of younger veterans now, men who are standing where I stood, men who have returned from places that rewired them. They're looking at civilian life like it's a country they've never been to, trying to find the entrance. I don't tell them what to do. I sit with them. I let them talk. I show them that a man who has seen what we have seen can still find something gentle and good waiting for him on the other side. That's the mission now, and I take it just as seriously as I ever took any other. Here is the quiet truth I have arrived at after all of it. The human spirit is not fragile. It was never fragile. It bends. God, it bends in ways that seem impossible to survive. But it has a memory for strength. And when you give it time, honesty, and even just one morning by a still lake where you let yourself put the weight down, it remembers. It remembers who you are underneath everything that was done to you and everything you had to do. And that person, that original, underneath person, is still there, still whole, still worth coming home to. If you're sitting with something heavy right now, I'm not going to tell you it gets easier overnight. I won't insult you with that. But I will tell you what I know from 23 years of being in the business of not giving up. The fact that you are still here, still watching, still breathing, still asking the question, that is not nothing. That is everything. That is the beginning of every mission I ever ran. You don't need to have all the answers today. You just need to take one step in the direction of the person you know you still are. That's enough. That has always been enough.